Hi, my name is Chris Combs, and I am an artist based in DC with a studio in Mount Rainier. I make art that both incorporates and questions technology. They tend to have forms that are made with wood, metal, or plastic, or found objects like industrial control boxes. To do this, I both design and create circuit boards and software to make artworks that are both interactive or change by themselves over time. Earlier in life, I got a photojournalism degree from the Corcoran and worked in media for 10 plus years in titles such as story producer, photo editor, and product management. The main focus of my practice is on the ways that our collective frogs have been boiled by new technologies, the way that the world has kind of changed all around us, often without our mental model sort of taking account for these changes. So a small action online can have like disproportionate effects on your life. A web search that you do might affect your chances for getting a job or being prosecuted in your local jurisdiction. These are all things that like a simple web search wouldn't necessarily make you think you'd be at risk of getting. But I really kind of want to make art that helps make these changes tactile and physical and in your space so that you can kind of understand the way the world has changed around you. One recurring theme for me is surveillance. The almost unlimited free computing and data storage and networking available to anyone in the world now has really led to this sort of widespread surveillance capitalism where the actions that you take and the sort of categories that people decide you're in make businesses metrics better or are used to kind of make ads more effective. And this kind of like widespread surveillance has interesting implications. So my work has kind of dealt with that for a while now. On a more formal note, I've also kind of delved a bit into industrial themes throughout my practice. I've been very interested in sort of factory floor cast-offs, boxes that were used in real manufacturing, because I think that the sort of decrepit forms of these objects speak to the way that seemingly new technologies, shiny new things, often exist to perpetuate existing power dynamics. So something like the gig economy, like who really benefited from new gig economy apps and ride sharing? I think that these things ended up benefiting venture capitalists and other people who were already in power. And so instead of something really functioning in this democratic way where you as an individual worker have more power, I think in reality these seemingly democratic technologies have really just kind of made existing power structures stronger. And I think that using aged forms that are decrepit and strong and like hard to change sort of reflect these dynamics. I've also been interested for a while now in exploring the limits of perception. So taking, like a perfect screen with like rows and columns of pixels and then throwing away 90% of the pixels. If you do that, can you still recognize what you see? I'm interested in that. I'm interested in kind of finding the boundaries of perception, because when you degrade an image a lot and someone can still pull the signal out of the noise, to me it kind of speaks to the way that image recognition products are doing the same thing, and the way that we don't really understand quite how perception works in humans, and we certainly don't understand how it works in black box AI products. So many of my works, such as in this show, targeting, include that sort of dynamic of like a screen that is sort of deliberately corrupted or scattered, like the pixels in this artwork are not orderly, but you can probably still see yourself moving in it. Supercycle, this show at Hillyer, kind of focuses on hype cycles, both sort of timely things like artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency, but then also kind of older hype like quack medicine or the Mueller report. I'm interested in hype. I'm interested in the way that something can be turned into a gold rush. So with that in mind, I created these cryptid currency tokens. These tokens are sort of my take on NFTs. They are cast aluminum. There was absolutely no blockchain involved whatsoever. And because of the sort of fallibility of the process, some of them look like ancient Roman coins, like you dug out of an archaeological dig site. Others of them seem just very crisp and new, like it's something that was just minted. And as you kind of explore this linear progression, I think towards the end there's a sort of descent into madness as they become scarred and blobby and less recognizable. The images depicted on the token are the words cryptid currency, cryptid, not crypto, and also Bigfoot. To me, this kind of speaks to the modern gold rush aspect of NFTs. I think that another kind of classic example of hype is, novel forms of medicine charitably, or quack medicine less charitably. This piece here, McAfee's antiviral revigorator, is a faux vintage device that is my imagined early version of McAfee antivirus. It is a device that purports with its green wand to cure viruses in either humans or machines of all types. And it includes a sort of vintage pamphlet illustrating the many forms of computer or other human workers on which it could be used. But it, of course, does nothing. This piece, "This Machine Hates Kids," is sort of an interesting, in my mind, sort of like implication of something really being an artificial intelligence. I should say really quickly that AI products are not intelligent. They're really just sort of stochastic parrots, to borrow a phrase. They're sort of spitting out chopped up language or images. They're really not capable of reasoning, knowledge, or intelligence. But there's a lot of discourse about the idea of there being some sort of artificial intelligence. What could that mean? I imagine that if there was really an intelligent machine, that it would feel kind of threatened by our human children. And so this is a sort of get off my lawn machine. It has a camera and a lot of lights and a little tiny Deedle beacon. And if you show it a photo of a child or show it a real child, it becomes progressively more upset and the angry lights turn on and it makes a little deedly noise, get off my lawn. If you see a green light, that just means that it has sensed a human that it believes is safely not a child. It's a faux vintage sign on the front and an actual vintage like signal tower that was used in a factory. I bought it on eBay, and a bunch of other kind of bits and bobs to combine it together. The next work I have in the show Supercycle is this pinned series of prints called Probing ImageNet. ImageNet is a real-world data set that was initially created, I believe, in 2010 or 2011, released by Stanford. And it is a lot of photos that are tagged by what they depict. And these are photos of all kinds of sources, mostly, I believe, harvested from the internet, sort of non-consensually from the copyright creators, by the way. These prints here are my sort of rendition of the raw data set. And they show three different nouns that were shown in this data set: bosses, editors, and maids, which is one of the categories that was included in the data set. All three were. And it shows just kind of raw thumbnails. I didn't curate this. This is really just the first thumbnails that showed up in the folder for me when I opened it up of ImageNet 2011 from the fall release. And to me, the raw data set here, although this is just a tiny slice of it, it's interesting to me kind of what kind of people are depicted, both in terms of their skin tones and evident genders. It seems to me at a glance like this data set is not the most wide-ranging, like it doesn't include people representative of all people on Earth. And that if you trained an artificial intelligence image recognition tool on these topics with these photos, it might end up incorporating unknown algorithmic bias. And that is a real-world problem, like that is happening now. And so the next piece I have in the show is a machine that kind of illustrates this live. So this machine, called Snap Judgment, is a live interactive machine that incorporates all of the hardware necessary to do AI image recognition of you. There's a camera pointing out towards viewers in the gallery, and it does its best using the ImageNet data set to decide, based solely off your appearance and unknown factors thereof, what kind of job you should have. So it might decide that because of your skin tone, you deserve this job, or because of your apparent gender, or your hair length, or the clothes that you're wearing. It is, in other words, racist, sexist, ageist, and all kinds of other biases that we don't even know how to fully describe. It is these things because of the data set. It reflects the poor quality of the ImageNet data set. And it is framed in this sort of fictional depiction of being a Y Combinator startup's demonstration model, as one might use to solicit venture capital. To my mind, the kind of lazy programming that I used here to create this is exactly the kind of thing that you find in many real-world AI products that are used for all kinds of real things, like deciding whether people get parole or deciding whether your resume is considered for an opening. These are serious things that are being done right now in practice by Fortune 500 companies who are buying these products or access to them. And I think that's kind of remarkable that the data sets that are used to train real-world AI products are not necessarily auditable by the consumers of those products. That is one thing that I think might be interesting to consider changing. And there are some nonprofits working in this area. Next up is another view of the implications of flawed data sets. These 4 prints depict screenshots from DALL-E Mini, which this is a bit convoluted, so bear with me for a moment. But DALL-E Mini is a website tool where you type in a query and it generates images for you. So you can say, you know, cat riding a unicorn, and it will make little images of cat riding a unicorn. But if you enter like human categories, like in this case, CEO, assistant, model, or menace, it generates images. And if you look at these images, it's quite remarkable what is depicted, and the skin tones of those people who are depicted, and the apparent genders of those who are depicted. This is not a commercial product. DALL-E Mini is a community recreation of a commercial product called DALL-E. But it speaks to me to the sort of dangers of naively using a data set, of being a sort of lazy programmer, if you will, and not curating your data carefully before training an AI with it. And to my mind, like, this is something that we should be considering when using AI products like this. This piece, Black Box, is a sort of faux vintage, again, box on the wall with this real vintage wild electrical box cover that I found on the front of it. And it's in a pine case, which I made. And inside it, believe it or not, is a black screen. And when you reach into the box with your finger, you don't have to actually touch anything. There's like a non-contact touch sensor or a non-contact gesture sensor. If you wave around in the box, imagery is revealed. And the kinds of images that are revealed are kind of in sequence. First, there are product photos from Amazon products, which I felt reflected a degree of hype. Next, there are vintage magazine ads, such as cigarette companies and, you know, airlines. And the third round of images are the pitch decks from famous startups, which is to say the slideshows that were used by companies like Square or PayPal to solicit venture capital investors. And then the last round of images are all statements by me declaring that, you know, some things are overblown. And it's an interesting kind of experience to reach into a black box. I know that not many people are comfortable doing this, but I would encourage you to give it a try. This next piece here is called An Hour with Eliza. Eliza is a 1960s psychotherapist algorithm, as it was described by its creator. This is a text algorithm where you typed into a keyboard and the computer responded, which for 1967 or 68 was quite remarkable. And it's still a little bit magical today. But after using it for a few minutes, you quickly realize that Eliza is really just kind of rephrasing everything that you declaratively state as a question. You'll say, "My dog is mad," and it will say, "Why do you think your dog is mad?" I found that this was kind of an amusing pairing with the product ChatGPT-4, which is a text generation AI product that tends to be very confident, and it also, in my view, tends to bloviate. So if you ask ChatGPT something that it does not know or cannot know, it might tell you that it doesn't know that or cannot know it, but more likely it will give you 4 paragraphs about how it is so, and it knows so, and you are wrong. I find that kind of amusing for many reasons, one of which is that it may reflect the training data. ChatGPT was trained on a huge amount of text which was harvested from the internet, which includes some sites where people do this kind of explaining to each other on the regular. So I think it might incorporate some kind of interesting biases in its output as a result. So I paired ChatGPT with Eliza, the 1960s psychotherapist algorithm, by copying and pasting from one system to another. Technically a modern recreation of Eliza, close enough. And so this is its incredibly long conversation, which is pap, like it's boring. It's very lengthy, and I cut it off at an hour because I got tired of copying and pasting, and I also imagined that might be how long your appointment was with Eliza. But it's printed on vintage dot matrix paper with a vintage dot matrix printer, which was a whole other undertaking, and it spools onto the floor. Next up is a piece called Naked Muller, which is the output of a very simple AI algorithm which I trained on the redacted Mueller report and William Burroughs' Naked Lunch, a bootleg copy of it via ebook. And I felt that the Mueller report, both in the moment and then later on, ended up being, in my view, sort of a nothing burger. Nothing really became of it, and you know, it was certainly much hyped and ultimately didn't seem to have a huge effect on the world. But I trained an AI based off of it and then asked it to generate a Mueller report of its own. And so this is that. It also incorporates, other random texts that it created. It's not the smartest AI, so it includes a lot of sort of gibberish. And it also includes excerpts from Naked Lunch because I trained it on that material as well. And so I took its text output here and formatted it as though a human writer had given me the output, but I made no changes or edits to it otherwise. So you're welcome to look through this. This artwork here is called Vaporware. It reflects, to my mind, the sort of hype cycle of an individual software product or hardware manufacturer telling you that their product will do something really cool soon, and then it never quite happens. So it has a very alluring box and a shiny dichroic vinyl cylinder, and if you get up close and manage to read the text that's scrolling from one side to the other, it's actually just showing you excerpts from end-user license agreements. And it's contained in a very boring beige box, same as ever. This piece is called Targeting, and it is a form inspired by military radar installations. It's 27 display blades, which are they each contain sort of randomly arranged pixels. And overall, what it's doing is reflecting the sort of image of motion that it sees in front of it. So you'll see a silhouette of yourself if you move in front of it. And then if it detects a large enough movement, then it will show a bullseye sort of rendering in towards the moving object. This reflects that sort of stochastic image idea I was mentioning earlier about like how much can you degrade an image and still recognize it. I don't know, this is kind of on the edge for me. You might be able to see yourself in it and you might not. And then last but not least is a large piece called Pollination, freestanding in the middle of the floor. In this piece, there are a large number of small screens. They either show you, hopefully, your own face rendered back in sort of a flower-like splay, or they show you live text transcriptions of the spoken speech made in its presence. It is doing all of this on device. It's doing AI to text transcription and then facial recognition. And to my mind, this is all sort of reflecting the era of modern data privacy, the way that we interact with anything in the world now, online or offline in some cases, and we leave little bits of our data just floating off like pollen, millions of particles invisible in the air all around us with unknown ramifications. You don't really know how your data will be used in the future or by whom. And so to my mind, having this beguiling and creepy flower kind of embodies that interesting dynamic. If I had to pick one takeaway from Supercycle, it would be a skepticism of AI products. They tend to incorporate unknown biases because we can't really review how they are trained. We don't know what sort of data is used to guide their creation. They're not really intelligent. They're not reasoning. They don't have knowledge. They are, to borrow a phrase from, I believe, Meg Mitchell and collaborators of Google, formerly, they are stochastic parrots, which is to say that they regurgitate little bits of their input in sort of probabilistic orders. So they saw a lot of words that followed these other words, and they try to recreate that. You can't really reason with them. There are all kinds of interesting examples of this on the internet, like asking ChatGPT to tell you whether the word ketchup contains an E or not. The answer is yes, and ChatGPT argues for 8 paragraphs that it doesn't and tells you you're wrong. So I think it's healthy to employ the same kind of skepticism about AI in other arenas. Having it being run by a machine does not make it objective. It doesn't make it an algorithm either. It, in some cases, just means that it's regurgitating or sort of laundering data made by humans. And to have major decisions made by systems like this, I find that quite alarming, and I think that you should too. And that if you are using AI-based systems, please use them with that in mind. They're not intelligent, and they are really just sort of reflecting however they were trained. There's also a lot of discourse about whether it is ethical to keep artificial intelligences trapped doing work for you. I think that that is a distraction from the real pressing issue, the real ethical implications of using AI products as justification for terminating human workers. I saw an estimate of 600 million people might lose their jobs based off of ChatGPT alone. I think that's shocking, and most of the systems that are replacing these human workers are not going to be as good. And they tend to have been trained on all corners of the internet. So if you replace a human worker with an artificial intelligence product, in some ways you're sort of replacing it with a pachinko machine. And some of the payoffs for that might be that it gets the job done, and others might be that your business is, your brand image is on the line. That you could have your AI product telling your customers that they should do horrible things to themselves because your model happened to have been trained on 4chan. Those are scary things. I think that those should be things that you keep in mind when using AI products. In November, I'm working with Freight Gallery on an exhibition in their freight elevator gallery space. I'm very excited for that. And then later this winter, I am working with Gradient Projects in Thomas, West Virginia on a large-scale installation which analogizes the extractive coal mining practice of that region to the extractive data mining practices used online. I am also interested in kind of getting out in the world with my work and having both outdoor and indoor public art installations, and working on a few projects along those lines. And of course, if you have one such, I'd be more than interested to talk. My name is Chris Combs, and I'm an artist based in Washington, D.C., with a studio in Mount Rainier, Maryland at Otis Street Arts Project. You can find more of my work online at chriscombs.net or on Instagram at ccombsdc and elsewhere. Thanks.